exceptional.
To trade or to sign? We'll tell you why one is better than the other for the Reds this offseason. And would you trade Joey Votto if he happens to be on a heater to begin the season? We'll give you our answer to that question on today's live edition of Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we are free and available on all podcasting platforms. I'm your host, Stephen Offenbaker, alongside Jeff Carr, and welcome into another Aloha Friday edition, live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Listen, Jeff and I have a passion for baseball. We have a passion for the Cincinnati Reds. And we have taken that passion and we have turned it into information for you. On today's podcast, we're going to do a little speculating, a little stirring of the pot. We're going to talk about trading. We're going to talk about signing, and we're going to talk about what we think the Reds may or may not do in regards to both. All right, Jeff, this is going to be a fun one. And before we dive into it, I just want to shout out the sponsor of today's episode. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. And where I want to start is what I missed out on yesterday that you got to talk about, Jeffrey, and that is the Reds seemingly being in on a reunion with the one and only Johnny Cueto, because you brought this up earlier several weeks back, and I poo-pooed the whole darn idea because Cueto was so good, but turns out that, it's a real thing. And listen, I'm all for this. Bring him back. Stick him in the fourth slot in the rotation and let him work his magic. Maybe he can help lead the Reds back to the postseason. Well, okay, maybe not, but he can definitely be good. He can be better than what was running out there at certain times during the last season when people were injured. I'm excited about the possibility that this could happen.
Well, what did you and I say to start this offseason? They need to sign a veteran presence to help them out in the rotation. They need a guy that is not going to be like an ace, but he's going to be a solid every fifth day, go out there, get the job done. That's what Johnny Cueto did last season. I mean, he had great numbers and very efficient numbers too. Like, he wasn't super high in the strikeouts. I kind of mentioned that yesterday, but he was very, very good at limiting walks. And he really only averaged about 15 pitches per inning. He wasn't doing a whole lot of, toying with hitters. It was just, let's go, let's get the outs, and let's get back in the dugout and get the lineup back on the field. I would love to see this deal. And just for, in case you did not see yesterday's episode where I talked a lot about this, I'll share the tweet. This was from John Morosi, tweeting out that the Reds have expressed interest in a reunion with Johnny Cueto. And this is huge too, Steve, because I was curious as to the extent of the Reds' interest in this, and I've been confirmed by a couple of folks close to the organization that the Reds actually talked to Johnny Cueto last offseason before he went to Chicago. So there is something to this.
I think that's the thing that surprised me the most is, this could be something that's been a couple years in the making.
Yep.
Who knows why it didn't come to fruition last year. And I got to tell you, I would have loved to have had Cueto around for the numbers that he put up last year, especially considering some of the players, the talent.
Well, and think
the Reds ran out there
from
last
all the
year.
Injuries at the beginning of the season. He would have helped with that immensely.
Absolutely. This is a big deal, Jeff. I just, I really didn't even think that this was a possibility up until, this news broke. And the more I've thought about it now, the more, I think that Nick Krall could pull this off. Because if you also remember, just a little over a week ago, Nick Krall went on the record and was like, we do have some money to spend. Not a lot of money, a little bit of money, but we have some money to spend. Spend it right here. Bring Johnny home.
Which, and depending on how exact these numbers are, different people are reporting that the payroll is right around 73 million, which is literally 50 million less than it was last year. So there is space to move with this. So people look at, the perceived market value of Johnny Cueto around 14 million. And they think, well, that sounds like a lot for this penny pinching Reds franchise. But with 50 million to play with, I mean, they're probably not going to spend all 50 million of that, but even 14 million in the 50 million, that's a small drop in that bucket.
Oh, I agree. I mean, between this and maybe an outfielder and a bullpen arm or two, if they spent $25 million, that's still a big savings over what they did the previous season. And, these would be short-term contracts that would come off the books in a year or two. It's kind of a no-brainer. It makes a whole lot of sense, which is probably the only thing that gives me pause because the Castellinis don't do anything that makes sense.
It's too obvious, right? It's just too easy.
The SOB, son of Bob, Phil Castellini, doesn't generally do things that are smart. So my hope is you are correct in your thoughts that because of everything that's happened, Phil has gotten out of the way of Nick Krall, because this seems like a move. This seems like a move that would be in Nick Krall's wheelhouse. Listen, I don't think we've given him enough credit for things like this. He's kind of been pretty good at these fringe moves that you don't necessarily think are a big deal, and then they ultimately end up being a big deal. We poo-pooed the Brandon Drury signing last year, and we're like, oh, whatever. It doesn't move the needle. It's not anything, and it ended up being great. And if they brought Johnny Cueto back, it fits that. It fits that thing that I said, a few weeks ago, Jeff, where they're not going to go out and sign a big money free agent, something that's going to warrant holding a press conference at Great American Ballpark. But signing Johnny Cueto, while not a big 10-year multi-million-dollar deal, this would be something they could schedule a press conference for and have the media out and have an event and, welcome Johnny home. And it would be kind of a big deal. And the casual fan knows who Johnny Cueto is. The casual fan knows what Johnny Cueto has done for this franchise. And the casual fan would love this and would buy some tickets to come see Johnny Cueto pitch in Cincinnati again.
100%, Steve. And the other thing that I saw in the comments, and I'm sorry I forgot to catch the username, so I can't shout you out specifically, but I saw a great comment that said, this kind of seems like a nice little deal for him to come back here and just kind of slide right on into the Reds Hall of Fame once he retires. And I'm like, this probably isn't something that the front office is considering, but that could be something that Johnny's considering. And that's a huge deal because obviously he has to sign off on it as well. He's got to make the decision to want to return to Cincinnati, understanding that this year they're not competing for anything, but he's going to be more of a mentor. He's going to be more of a solidifying presence on this roster and in this pitching staff. But I do have a question for you, Steve. And I'm going to ask, actually, I have a couple of questions that we're going to ask you that
I have all the answers
to trading And it pertains to kind of comparing this as well when it comes to all of that. I want to ask you that coming up here in just a minute, because it includes a rumor that we've already heard, and it includes a thought about Joseph Daniel Votto. That's coming up here in just a moment. Before we get into that, though, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Built Bar is the absolute best. I mean, if you have not tried Built Bar just yet, you have to. I'm talking about some new reimagined flavors that Built Bar has come out with. They've got cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, and coconut brownie topper as well. These bars are phenomenal, covered in 100% real chocolate, whether you're talking about milk chocolate, dark chocolate, or white chocolate, depending on the flavors. And they have amazing levels of protein in them. They've also got, they're venturing into the granola area. They've got white chocolate peppermint granola. That is some kind of flavor combination, Steve. It's Built's take on the granola bar, and it's so more filling and still insanely tasty. And candy cane brownie puff as well. We're getting in the Christmas spirit around Built. Built puffs are like biting into the universe's most delicious cloud, and they've got a candy cane brownie puff. Oh my gosh. Merry Christmas to us all. First off, for anyone who hasn't tried Built bars before, they're literally the best tasting protein bars ever built. They're revolutionizing nutrition as we know it, with 100% real chocolate, 17 grams of protein, and shockingly low sugar and calories. And they've only got 130 calories per bar. Just sink your teeth into that first bite, and it'll change your life forever. You're probably wondering which new flavor is my favorite flavor. That's a clown question, bro. They're all unbelievable, and they're all different. So you can order a mix box and try all the flavors for yourself. Built. You got to try this. Get 15% off your order right now by using the code LOCKEDON15 at Built.com. That's LOCKEDON 15 at Built.com. Coming up Monday, what can we expect, Steve, from Rake Fraley? Saw a great article by our friends over at the Red Reporter talking about Jake Fraley and comparing at least his right-handed splits to a couple of very nominal players. And I think you'll find that interesting. That's what we're talking about on Monday. But Steve, well, first off, what's on your mind? You look like you got something on your mind.
No, I do. I'm sorry I got click happy on the video button there. I was just trying to get ready to drop some comments in, and then you threw me off because you managed to spell Locked On 15, and I was trying to figure out how it was that you could spell that, but you can't spell Jeff. It was very confusing to me. But I wanted to cut in before you did the lead in, because I just wanted to, shout out the fact again that we are live, which is why we're screwing it up so bad right now. But we thank all of you guys for being here live with us. The comment section is always on fire, and I just wanted to highlight a little bit of that before we jump into the second segment. Carlton checks in, says even with 100 losses, he is still chomping at the bit to see the boys of summer again. I am right there with you, Carlton. I am so excited to get back to Cincinnati once baseball season starts. Scott Campbell's with us today. He just shouts aloha, and I say aloha right back. Just scrolling through again. Steve McCoy's in. Aloha, let's go. Happy to have you guys here. The comment section is open. Get your comments, get your questions in there. When we hit the third segment, you will be in the driver's seat. You'll be driving the ship, and we will take on as many of these as we can. Sorry to hijack the segment there, Jeff. Proceed.
That's okay. I appreciate that, because I do want to start this segment off with a comment that we received on an earlier video, and I find this question interesting, Steve. This is from Kenneth DeCombs. I believe I read that right. Kenneth DeCombs. And he says, if Joey Votto happens to start out next season hot, like you and me are both saying that he will, to the point which a team becomes interested for a decent prospect, would you want to trade him? Or will you utilize that production and keep the contract instead of getting out from it? And Kenneth says, I would trade him. Would you?
Well, the comment section was way ahead of you. These are already loaded. Says what? Says, don't you dare trade Joey Votto. Carlton says, love him, but if the deal makes sense, then why not trade him and let him get a ring? Danny says Joey has suffered enough. If he wants a chance to win a ring, he should be allowed to go. Listen, here's the thing, folks. Joey Votto has been asked about this many, many times, and he has said, Nobody from the Reds has ever approached me about being traded. I don't want to be traded. I want to be a career Cincinnati Red. Joey has a no trade clause. So, it would have to be, the Reds would have to approach him first and come to him with, hey, we have a deal. Are you interested in going? And Joey might not want to go. I don't believe that he's lying when he says he wants to stay here and finish out his career. He's had ample opportunity to demand a trade or force a situation where he could go somewhere else. All that being said, if a great deal comes along and the Reds can get something for Votto and Votto is willing to go, great. If Votto decides tomorrow he wants to go and the Reds can't get anything but a bucket of balls for him, let him go anyway. Joey Votto deserves to do what Joey Votto wants to do because, he's taken a lot of abuse during his time in Cincinnati. Yeah. He's been undervalued. He's been underappreciated, and he's done fantastic things. And I want to see Joey get a ring also. I want that for him. So, if the Reds can get something for him and he's willing to go, do it. If he wants to be a career Red and he doesn't want to leave, I don't care what they have to pay him. If he wants to be here, let him be here.
That's the hardest part I have about this is because personally I would say no. I want to keep him here forever, but I also want him to play for another 1,000 years. That's probably not going to happen. So I look at this and I say, what's best for him? Because that's what the Reds should do in this case. There's a very small, tiny chance that whatever they get back in a trade for Joey Votto is going to be a kind of dude that really makes a huge impact on the major league roster. So I don't necessarily know that they should be sitting there and trying to evaluate the trade based on the value they receive. I think at the end of the day, the only reason Joey Votto gets traded is because Joey Votto is okay with the trade. Joey Votto wants to get that ring, and the Reds are obliging him for that. I don't think that there's a scenario where this is a value-based proposition. So with that being said, yes, he's going to have to show that he's healthy and that he can perform at a level that more like 2021 as opposed to 2022 to entice a team to want him. But also it's got to be a situation that he says yes to. So I think that at the end of the day, I would do this for the sake of Joseph Daniel Votto. I think that there's probably a less than 10% chance that this happens.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm with you. I don't want it to happen. I'm really torn about the fact that we're probably going to see the Joey Votto farewell tour next season anyway. I wouldn't want that to be cut short, but I think I just want to reiterate that for me, it really comes down to whatever Joey wants. If he wants to try and, facilitate a trade to the Blue Jays or the Dodgers or to somebody that's, all in on winning right now, maybe the Mets want him to be a DH against right-handed pitching. God knows Cohen, $25 million to Cohen is a drop in the bucket.
Oh man.
So, I mean, if that's what Joey wants, do it. But if Joey, and I think he really means it when he says it. Yeah. If he wants to be a career Red, then tough cookies. Let him play out his contract.
I think that's going to be the biggest question mark. And we're going to talk about this during the season of, I think it's about a 99% chance the Reds don't pick up that team option for $20 million next year. But what is the Joey factor in this? Does he want to come back on a cheaper contract? Does he want to come back for whatever that looks like? That's going to be an interesting thing as well. So yeah, he's only got one more guaranteed year left, but the Joey Votto factor in all of this is completely unknowable because I still think he's going to have it in his mind at the end of this season that he can play more, and what that looks like for the rest of his career. It's going to be very intriguing because I agree. I don't think that he is BSing the fan base when he says he wants to be a career Red. And if he still thinks that there's more to that career, that's really where the test is going to be. Because I believe that the Reds have never approached him with a trade offer? Probably. There might have been a couple of cases over the last 10 years. But I think for the most part, the biggest test will be whenever that option's not picked up and they buy him out for, I think it's, $7 million they have to buy him out for. Then does he return on a much cheaper deal that's more team friendly, or does he go somewhere else?
It'll be interesting because, I mean, he said on national television he wants to play. If you recall, during the Field of Dreams game, they asked him about this while he was conducting his interview while playing first base. That he said, I want to play. I want to keep playing. Basically, I texted you at the time. I said, Jeff, he just told the Castellinis to pick up his option. That's really what he just said. So, I think he still believes he has baseball in him beyond 2023. So you're absolutely right. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm looking forward to lots of discussion about this. And I'm just, for me, going to try and savor each and every at bat that he's in a Reds uniform next year, because we just really don't know when it's going to be the last one. But with that being said, Jeff, coming up, it's going to be time to let the listeners take over the driver's seat. So get those questions and comments rolling in the comment section, because coming up in just a minute, we are going to put you in charge within reason. But before we get to that, appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Listen, speaking of hanging out, if you're out hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think about calling for a ride and you tell yourself, I live close. I can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance could go up. You might lose your license. Maybe you'll lose your job. Maybe you total your car. Maybe you even kill somebody. Everyone knows about the risks of drinking while drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while they're under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roadways. They're doing it to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's life forever. Remember, drive sober or get pulled over. All right, you guys know where to find us. You can follow the podcast on all platforms, including right here on YouTube. We are live today. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Can't wait to get into the comment section and see what you guys want to talk about today. In between episodes, you can follow Jeff and I both on Twitter. You can follow me at @SOffenbaker. That's with 2 Fs. You can follow Jeff at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs, because he can't spell that, but he can spell Locked On 15. I don't know what's going on with that. And you can follow the show at Locked On Reds. You can also subscribe to us on all the audio feeds as well. All right, Jeff, it is question and answer Q&A time. Normally we would kind of cut off here, but we're going to keep it rolling for the audio feed for a little bit longer and kind of dig into these questions. So I'm scrolling through to see where we might want to dive into this. Give me just a second. Fill for me for just a second.
And while you look for that, just a quick note. Next week coming up, we are going to truncate the schedule just a little bit as we move through Christmas and New Year's and the dog days of the off season. Heading into pitchers and catchers reporting, we will be going down to 3 to 4 episodes a week. Now, if there is big news that the Reds do sign Johnny Cueto, you can bet your bunions, no matter what number of episodes we've had that week, we're going to have another one, because there's going to be a lot of celebrating to do if Johnny Cueto comes back to Cincinnati. But yes, starting next week, going to cut down from 5 days a week to 3 to 4 days just for a few weeks during this offseason.
All right, here we go. Jimmy McFarland checks in. He says he jumped into the chat a little bit late. There are no excuses for that. No, I'm kidding. Jimmy wants to know who's going to play left field next season, Jeff. This is an interesting question because there's one lane that involves going and getting somebody. There's one lane that says roll with what you got. And then there's my personal favorite, and I'll start this off, which is I want Jonathan India to play left field next season. I want the Reds to move him to the outfield and bring up the young guys as part of the youth movement to fill out that infield. I know that's not quite the popular opinion, but I think in the long term, it's probably the one that might be in the best interests of the Reds.
I think they can. I think they've got a couple of talented dudes that they can move around a little bit, especially if they're going to be committed to still giving Jose Barrero some playing time at shortstop to begin the year. You could start Kevin Newman at third base or second base. Newman. And you can start Spencer Steer at one of the other positions, if it's third base or if it's second base. Spencer Steer is a pretty decent defender at either position, and Kevin Newman is a much better defender than Spencer Steer is at both those positions. So you could still work that around. It's not as if you move Jonathan India to left field and you all of a sudden don't have anybody that can play second base. That's just not the case here. So I think that could be the case. I wonder, though, if whether through trade of acquiring an outfielder or through free agent signings, if they don't acquire a right fielder and they start Jake Fraley in left field. I could see that being, that's something that we'll talk a lot more about on Monday when we look at Rake, but I wonder if Jake Fraley's not our left fielder next year.
Well, and if he is, I mean, he's only going to play against right-handed pitching, right? So you're going to have another viable option. And listen, Jimmy, I appreciate you, because not only do you ask a question, but you propose possible answer along the way too. So here's what Jimmy is asking as far as an outfielder: Joey Gallo to go along.
Adam
with
Dunn
Joey.
Light, as he's known around my farm.
Exactly. What do you think about this, Jeff?
Joey Gallo would be interesting to me because we're getting away from the shift. The shift has drastically affected him because everyone knows that he's not going to hit against it. He's not going to bunt against it because he just never has. If you had seen any of the Yankees games or any of the Dodgers games in which he played last year, the way that teams played him, they wouldn't even have their third baseman play shortstop. They would literally have all four of their infielders on the right side of the field and dare him to hit it on the right side of the field. Like, just basically say, you're not going to hit it on the left side. We're going to get you out. And that happened almost every time. So it's very interesting. It'll be very interesting to see how he handles the shift going away. The other part of this, though, means that he's another lefty. We got plenty of lefties in the outfield already. So I don't necessarily know that he would be the everyday guy. I think he would just be another one of Jake Fraley, really.
Reds win 77. Has opinions. He wishes we got Haniger. What do you think there?
That would have been nice. I mean, he's a veteran outfielder that's really proven a lot in Seattle and deserved to have a contract for another contender. I think that there's a lot of guys that really would have just not considered Cincinnati because of their non-contention status. Like, Nick Krall probably kicked the tires on some of these guys, and they're just like, yeah, look, I appreciate him, but I'm looking for somebody who's going to make the playoffs this year.
Exactly. So let's move back to the conversation for just a minute about the Reds bringing in Johnny Cueto. Colton checks in and says he's kind of mixed on that idea. If next season is really about building for the following one for 2024, then he'd like to see who in the minors can move up and fill the fourth and fifth starter spots. He doesn't feel that signing Cueto is a move that looks forward. This is interesting because I really believe the fifth starter in the rotation for 2023 is going to be a rookie. I think it's going to be whoever of Stout or Williamson or Abbott or, maybe a surprise guy that we don't think is ready for primetime yet suddenly shows up and is ready for primetime. I think it's going to be one of those guys in the fifth starter spot. I don't necessarily believe we're going to catch the amount of luck that would be required to have two guys ready to slide right into the rotation at the beginning of 2023. So for me, the Cueto signing makes sense because it's a feel good. It's a name that everybody knows. It helps put people in the stands during what's the tail end, we hope, of the rebuild. And it still lets those other starters that aren't quite ready go down to Louisville, get ready, stretch out, learn to be a starting pitcher. And then you've got that fifth spot that can be filled by whoever went out and took it during spring training. And then those guys down in Louisville will be working to fill the inevitable injury spot, because it's not going to be a situation where the Reds just start five guys all year long. There's going to be a time where you need another dude. Even if it's just for a double header to fill in, you're going to need that other dude. So for me, I don't think that signing Cueto means you're not committed to developing the youth and getting them ready for 2024. I think you can do both things.
I would agree with that. And in fact, I would even go as far as to say maybe even signing an outfielder would be more detrimental to the will they figure out the youngsters plan than signing Johnny Cueto would. Now, I'm not saying that I'm against signing an outfielder. That's a different thing. But when it comes to signing Johnny, I look at this and I say, if they add too many and if everyone is healthy, because last season they weren't, like starting the year last year, remember, Luis Castillo was hurt. Tyler Mahle started opening day. You had Nick Lodolo not necessarily ready to go on opening day. There's guys that weren't all there who ended up pitching significant portions of the season. So that's probably going to happen again this year. Like, the best that we can hope for in spring training is that none of that happens, but it usually does. The only time in my life that the Reds had 5 starters all season long was 2012. And that was a special season for a lot of different reasons. So you sign Johnny Cueto, you really solidify the depth of this rotation, and you take the pressure off of Williamson, Stout. You take the pressure off of Connor Overton coming back from a back injury. You take the pressure off of Luis Sessa trying to figure out if he actually is a starter or if he's more of a reliever. Like, all of these guys, and if they all are healthy, then hey, you can do that thing that we like talking about a lot, and that's a 6-man rotation. It's just that never happens because nobody's healthy all at the same time.
Never listen to me about this. It's a great idea.
I agree with you. It's a great idea. And if everybody's healthy, they could do it. It's just there was no point last year where everybody was healthy or everybody wasn't traded. So they just couldn't do that. But I think that at the end of the day, this is actually a better deal to promote the growth of the franchise than the idea of blocking somebody.
All right, for the YouTube viewers, stay right here. We're going to keep on with you in the driver's seat and continue forward. For the audio listeners, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. The rest of the Q&A will be coming at you as a bonus episode in your feed a little bit later today. But for the audio listeners, that's going to do it for us today. Coming up, as Jeff said, we're going to next week dig into Jake Fraley, or Rake Fraley as he likes to call it, and we'll continue to look at the rumors, the hot stove, the transactions. We're going to have you covered on all of those things. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. They've got the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day that's almost always as hot a take as mine are. The Locked On Sports Today podcast, just like Locked On Reds, is available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check out the bonus episode coming with the Q&A, because we're going to keep you locked on Reds every single day. All right, Jeff, let's get into some more of these questions in the comments.
I want to set this straight, though, by the way. I didn't come up with Rake. Rake was actually a Seattle nickname. They gave him that name. And so whenever he came over, he just came with that nickname.
We fleeced him for that, too.
Yeah, they weren't happy when I said that about the Luis Castillo deal.
I know they weren't. You were in trouble. You were a naughty boy as far as they concerned. Listen, Reds win 77. Still on this outfield thing. Signing of free agents, Jeff. Duvall, AJ Pollock. I'm a hard no on AJ Pollock, but I could live with an Adam Duvall reunion at Great American Ballpark.
As much as you are a hard no on AJ Pollock, I'm a hard yes on Adam Duvall. Adam Duvall checks all the boxes. He's good defensively, got a great arm, and he hits right-handed. He can play that platoon, and I don't think at this point in his career he's expecting an everyday starting position, because that's just not what he's done for the last few years. So I think that they could bring him in on like a 1 year, maybe a 1 year with a team option, prove it type deal, and then maybe flip him if he's absolutely crazy hot in the first half of the season. But overall, you definitely have that platoon where he can play all 3 outfield positions. He can play center field in Great American Ballpark, and he played center field in Atlanta a little bit too.
Absolutely. I would love to see it. It's another one of those guys, Jeff, that the casual fan knows. The casual fan recognizes the name, and it would be something people might want to come out to see. Listen, there's a whole side conversation going in the comment section. I see you guys. I'm not going down this Trevor Bauer rabbit hole that's happening, but I do just want to say that the comments that are saying that he's suspended, he's ineligible. He's on the commissioner's ineligible list. He cannot be signed. He cannot play. That's where he is on this. The quirky picker, Chad, how are you? He's like, I'm here. What did I miss? You missed a lot. Make sure you check out the feeds when these episodes post. Dave Pemberton, Dave, how you doing? Glad to have you watching the episode. Says to Jeff, I think, because I wasn't here, you talked yesterday about extending India. What do you think a contract for that would look like? That's a really good question, Dave, because I think that India, with his injuries and the weirdness of his injuries last season, actually lowered his value just a touch, and an extension for him probably wouldn't make sense until following 2023 after he proves it a little bit. I don't know the numbers, Jeff. What do you think? What would you say?
And this is what I said yesterday, is I think him playing through those injuries was him proving it. I think that he has proved that he deserves an extension because he is loyal and a leader on this franchise. But I think overall, I think a successful extension, not what I think they could get, but a successful extension for him on his contract would be 7 years. And I'd say, see if you could get him for 12 million a year. I think that would look like a huge raise right now, but in a couple of years, when I think his progression has gotten to the point that he is one of the better second basemen or / hopefully left fielders in all of baseball, he would turn into a bargain at 12 million. So I think 7 years, 12 million a year, that would be amazing.
I think Reds win 77 is predicting India here. It was just immediately following Pemberton's question, but Reds win 77 says, it sounds crazy, but he thinks India could hit 30 or 40 home runs and a 270 average. 40 sounds a little on the high side for me. I think he's got a lot more gap power than just 40 bombs kind of power. But if this happens, I'm all in. And to your point, Jeff, yeah, I still struggle if we only get to pick one hitter that gets extended. Do we give India that kind of deal, or do we give it to Tyler Stevenson?
And this wasn't even of the guys of, will it only be one? I think it's just this offseason. Like this offseason, you extend one guy. Next offseason, you extend one or two guys because you'll have those contracts coming off the books from Joey and Moose. But I think it's a progression. It's something that we talked about that, the Braves have done a brilliant job of setting up waves, setting up like a ladder where it's like, okay, this guy comes up this year, this guy comes off next year, and all this other stuff. So I think that the Reds need to start that this offseason. And I think you start that with Jonathan India as a way of awarding him for what he's done for the franchise to this point, and also to kind of prove to him a little bit that he means something to this franchise. Because I think after the last couple of years of seeing Castellanos leave and seeing Farmer leave and seeing all these guys either unceremoniously traded or, sent to free agency with a gift bag and we're not calling you anymore type thing, then you show him like, dude, we do value you. Because I think right now he's got to be thinking, how long am I actually going to be here?
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's keep plowing through this. And I love doing it this way, Jeff, because it almost, we seem very distracted because we just are jumping all over the place. It's almost like squirrel, but let's jump back to Joey Votto. Scott Campbell thinks we should only trade Joey Votto to Toronto. That would be a feel-good story, Scott. And, we've all long speculated that that's the best fit, but, at the end of the day, and the quirky picker Chad points this out as well, it's up to Joey. Joey has a full no trade clause. So at the end of the day, he will only go where he wants to go and only if he wants to go. But I'm with you. If he has to wear another uniform, if he has to go somewhere, I think I could live with watching him play first base for the Toronto Blue Jays for a season or two and not be very broken up about it.
And I think trying to understand the unknowable thing, and that is Joey Votto's brain. I think if you're picking any other franchise that's not the Reds that he would probably want to play for, I bet that would be at the top of the list.
Okay, so Mother Goose checks in now and is trying to start some crap, and I am going to roll with it because I am not afraid. Would you be okay with a trade to, say, the Cardinals for Joey to have a chance to win a ring, assuming the deal is right by the Reds? No. I don't care what they're willing to give us in return. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear it.
I don't think they'd take that deal anyway. They've already got a first baseman. They're not.
It just doesn't matter. This is like some crap starting comments right here. And I am just, no, I will not embrace Joey Votto to the Cardinals in any way, shape or form. No.
I can't think of another scenario that's comparable to. Like that would be
no. It'd be like Joe Burrow going to the Steelers tomorrow. Like, no, we're not. It's just no, it's not happening. Just not going to do it. Just not going to do it. Sorry, my computer's running a little slow. Give me just a second, guys. They're not going to release Joey Votto. That's not going to happen. No. even if he wants out.
It's one of the best players in franchise history. They're not going to just no.
So Carlton says he'd be okay with a trade to the Redbirds, and Carlton is wrong. We're not going to do that under any circumstances. So this Chad jumps in with what we were just talking about, Jeff. India Stevenson, long-term deals. What are the chances of it actually happening if they lock up anybody long-term? Chad believes slim to none, in his opinion, that they lock up anybody. I don't agree with this. I really do think they're going to make an honest effort, I believe, to lock up one hitter and one of the young pitchers for longer term deals and then roster churn everybody else. For me, if Stevenson hits 35 or 40 home runs this coming season and plays a full year healthy, I think he's the guy that they approach to lock up long term. India, subpar defensively at second base. Maybe if they move him to left field, it changes this conversation a little bit. But, as things are, as they stand, all things being equal right now, both guys healthy in 2023, I go with Stevenson.
I do think that they will lock some folks up. And I mean, even because we talk about the Tampa model and all that other stuff, even Tampa locked up Wander Franco. Like, they locked him up for a long time too. They got, I think it was like 11 years on that contract. So this is something that even Tampa does in their model of, constant roster churn and stuff like that. So I definitely think it's going to be at least one. I think that the Reds are going to try to marry the plan of the Braves and the Rays and try to see if they can get a couple of more guys, because there is an element that will always be until they sell the team of the Castellinis getting involved. And there's going to be a moment where the Castellinis go, hey, I think I'd like to see this guy be around for a little bit longer. And so then they will pony up some kind of dollar sign to get that guy. But I think at the end of the day, we're seeing multiple people locked up long term.
Speaking of the Castellinis ponying up money, Jimmy McFarland wants to know why the Reds don't just pay King Griffey Jr. off and get that salary off the books and kind of, basically end this whole conversation about Ken getting his money. Listen, that's a big check. I think he still owes 2 or 3 more years. So we're talking $369 million. SOB, the son of Bob, Phil Castellini, would have to sell a lot of lettuce, literally, to write a check that big. He's not going to do it. And I think there's some other interests at play, Jimmy. I think that there's some interest payments attached to the money that's, I don't think it would be in King Griffey Jr.'s favor to take a lump sum at this point. I think he makes a little bit more money on top of that just by it being paid out the way that it is. Because, your point, though, is well taken. You could ask the same question in New York with Cohen seemingly never running out of money. Why not just pay Bobby Bonilla off and end the Bobby Bonilla Day tweets that we get to see every year? I think that the player benefits from it being paid out on schedule. I think that's the reason why we don't see that.
This is kind of like that whole, what's that thing that you always hear once a year, the Publishers Clearinghouse, win so much money every month for the rest of your life or something like that. This is what King Griffey Jr. did, in his contract negotiation back when it was kind of popular to defer your money. He was like, look, I want to retire, but still have this amount of money coming in. So this is probably baked into his contract. Yes, you're paying me through this year so that I know, I can kind of build my life around the fact that I'm still getting some decent money.
Tyler Dolly, I'm sorry, I'm screwing that up. Dolly, I think. Tyler, thanks for participating today. Sorry, I know I just butchered your last name, bro. I apologize. He says he'd love to see the Reds go after Brian Reynolds or Andrew Benintendi if we're willing to part with a shortstop prospects. Reynolds is a switch hitter as well. This is not bad. What do you think, Jeff?
I've got a hot take where it concerns Brian Reynolds. I don't think the Pirates are trading Brian Reynolds because every rumor that comes out about Brian Reynolds and say, okay, well, so-and-so contact, this, that, and the other, it is always followed up with another thing that says, and they found out that the price was too high. Apparently the price for Brian Reynolds is literally in the same ballpark as Juan Soto. And I'm sorry, Brian Reynolds is a good player. He's nowhere near as good as Juan Soto is. So I don't think they're ever going to do it.
I think I agree with you. I don't think it's going to happen. And sometimes teams structure a deal okay, yeah, we're trying to accommodate you. We're going to try and trade you. And then they go and ask for the world and they get to say, hey, we tried. and Brian Reynolds continues to play for them. So,
and I said it was a hot take. I don't think
you.
it's that hot of a take.
It's really
that's
not.
Me.
Hey, this goes back to what you were saying earlier in the week. Jeff Carlton says he likes the sound of the center fielder from Baltimore. Sounds like a great prospect, but hate to hear the price for him. I don't know that it's that big a price. I mean, what did we talk about? We talked about Arroyo in that deal.
You mean for Mason R, I think?
I think so.
Yeah, I think and based on baseball trade values, I think that R was I think he was actually a little bit less on the value scale than where Edwin Arroyo is. So I'd be interested to see how that goes. I've also seen some folks talking about, hey, maybe they could make a trade for Joe Adell. Believe it or not, Joe Adell's value is far lower than any of the names that we've brought up so far. Like, I think according to baseball trade values, Joe Adell's value is like 1.6. So to trade one of the guys that the Reds have right now, the Reds would need more than just Joe Adell in that trade. And then the Angels farm system is a whole bunch of pitching and not a lot else. Because what was it? I think it was like the last 2 drafts, they drafted like 20 pitchers or something. It's crazy what they've been doing. And
like the Reds with shortstops, basically.
Yeah.
Hey, Jimmy McFarland, keep them coming, my friend. He watched some highlights on Diamondbacks outfielder Alek Thomas and thinks he looks like TJ Friedl.
He's better than TJ Friedl.
I think he's better than TJ Friedl. I think that Alek Thomas would be an upgrade there. And nothing against TJ Friedl, but I think TJ Friedl is a platoon guy that is this F troop, and I bet they don't like being called that. We may need to move away from that, but the F troop outfield, if used correctly, can be decent, but you're going to have to platoon those guys. Alek Thomas might be able to play every day.
Yes, I think he will for sure. And if you look, I think folks, whenever I brought up Alek Thomas, folks looked at last year's stats that I had kind of posted up as well. And they said, oh, he's not that good. That was his first year in the major leagues. If you look at all of his minor league stats, dude was phenomenal. His last year in AAA, he slashed 300, 400, 500. Like, he is an absolutely phenomenal hitter. And he's got to get it working at the major league level. I think it'll begin this season. And I think that he would be a guy you could build your outfield around for the next 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, I think that's right. You sold me on this one, and I mean, a couple of things happened during that episode. You turned me around on going out and getting this guy, and I finally figured out that you're a closet Diamondbacks fan. So those 2 things alone were great. I mean, I learned a lot in that episode, Jeff. I really do appreciate you for that.
Fantasy tip for anybody: get Christian Walker next year. That guy was pretty good.
There you go. Austin Bowley checks in. Jeff, Austin, appreciate you listening. Appreciate you watching. If the Reds sign Cueto, will they be afraid to trade him mid-season? I wouldn't feel bad about trading Corey Kluber, but I might feel bad about trading Johnny Cueto. This is actually a great question.
Mm-hmm. It's one I don't have an answer to. I'm not going to lie, because I think if you sign Johnny Cueto, it's also with the idea that you're not going to trade Johnny Cueto and that he's going to retire a Red.
I mean, it would really ruin that whole feel good of the whole thing, wouldn't it? And which makes me think that the Castellinis would absolutely do it. I would venture to say that before Johnny Cueto would sign with the Reds, there would be a conversation. Whether or not he was open to being traded. If he signs with Cincinnati as kind of a farewell tour for him, he may ask them for a no trade clause. And if they really want to have him, they'll have to give it to him. This is a great question, Austin. I don't know 100% the answer, but
does that change your feelings on them signing him? Because it doesn't.
It doesn't. If they have to give him a no trade clause to do it, then I still would like them to do it.
Yeah. I agree. And I know that's,
and if he doesn't have a no trade clause and they trade him, well, that's just part of the game, and it is what it is. But,
and I know that's something we talked about, like with a guy that we would want the Reds to sign him to a 1-year deal with the idea that they could trade him for a prospect later on. I think this is one situation where I'm kind of okay breaking that idea, because I don't want to be like, can you think like there'll be a thought in the back of our mind if they sign Johnny Cueto and they trade him in the middle of the season, we're the team that traded Johnny Cueto twice. Like, I don't think so.
Especially if he goes somewhere and goes like 6 or 7-0 with a 2.4 ERA, and we're all like, what the heck is going on? All right. Carlton Van Hoy checks in, says that forecast that had Cruz in center field was interesting. And I was saying this before we started recording, Carlton. I was talking to Jeff about this. I found it interesting as well. Jeff doesn't seem to have a big problem with it. I don't like it. There's I've talked a lot about moving Matt McLean to the outfield. And the reason that I don't have a problem with that is he's already an outfielder. He played outfielder in Little League. He played outfielder in high school. He played outfield in college, and he can play outfield in the pros. It's not a stretch. Elly De La Cruz is the shortstop of the future, and there is really no good reason to move him to the outfield. And if for some reason they decide, because I do allow for the possibility that he's not done growing and he's not done bulking, and he may just eventually get too big to be an effective shortstop. I'm not opposed to moving him to third base, because that body type lends itself great to playing the hot corner, and you make some adjustments that way. I don't see another, let's move our surefire infield prospect to the outfield where he's never played. I don't see it.
Yeah. And I can kind of see why Baseball Reference or Baseball America did this, because, I mean, his body type definitely lends itself to more of an outfielder than a shortstop. But I also think that, I mean, we saw the value of having a top flight shortstop. The Giants paid a ton of money for a ton of years to get Carlos Correa. And that's been the theme of this offseason, is how high can you go to pay for a shortstop? And if the Reds can get Elly De La Cruz, and maybe after his first year extend him for a long period of time, then you got your dude. You've got your key piece for the future. And the only pause that I have about moving him to center field is just Nick Senzel. Like I'm scarred a little bit about moving an infielder to the outfielder, and I don't necessarily know that I want to see it again this soon.
No, and it just doesn't make sense. I'm beating that a little bit, but it doesn't make sense. Andy checks in, Jeff. Andy wants to know about the possibility of signing Jeter Downs, and I think I saw you talking about this on Twitter yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, minor league deal, invite to spring training. I could see that. I mean, he's always been a guy that just didn't have a huge ceiling. Like I think everybody kind of thought he had a decent floor, but he wasn't really going to get much better. And the time that he got last season for the Red Sox, he hit $150. Like, I mean, he was the level of the same that we saw from our catchers last year. So I don't necessarily know that there's a hurry to come and add him, but I would like to see him on a minor league deal. Maybe they could recoup some value from that trade. It's so funny though, because looking at that trade from the Red Sox perspective, where they trade Mookie Betts for Alex Verdugo, Jeter Downs, and some catching prospect nobody cares about because they've never seen him in the major leagues. It's literally just Mookie Betts for Alex Verdugo. Like, oh my gosh.
That's not hard to figure out who won that trade, I don't think. Jimmy McFarland. Joey Gallo would hit the Toyota.
I could see that. I could definitely see that.
Carlton did not miss a beat, Jeff. It would be Gallo's only hit this year.
That was what Yankees fans were talking about. They're just like, holy crap, he hits long home runs and then strikes out for the next 5 days. And then he comes back and he hits another long home run. Like, I mean, honestly, he's kind of the professional version of Aquino with a little bit better ability to take a walk. I think that's really what we're looking at there. So I think Joey Gallo's a name, but I think if you really were to look at his numbers, and maybe I'll do this when we talk about Jake Fraley on Monday, but if you look at his numbers, I don't think that he's very appealing.
Carlton also weighed in and says that he doesn't think the Reds want to win this year. But then I put this up, Jeff, because he goes to something we haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about. And that's, imagine if the Reds had won the lottery, the draft lottery we're talking about. He says Drew would have been a huge get, but I did want to talk about the lottery for a second. Were you bummed or bothered at the way that went down? Did it? I mean, because being a lifelong Cincinnati sports fan, I just automatically assumed we were going to pick lower than where we were supposed to. That's just the way that was going to go. But I mean,
I did think it was funny.
Is it a big deal? Is it a big deal?
I don't know that it's that big of a deal. I do remember back in August talking about, it's like I saw the hashtag lose for Cruz, And I'm like, oh yeah, I can get on that. Let's see if we can get a high probability of getting the number 1 pick. And Doug Gray responded, and he's just like, we've got as much a chance of being 7th as we got as being 1st. And it's like, Doug
called it.
That's really the only pause that this gives me. Sorry, Doug. I was like, how is Doug right about this? But no, I look at this and I say, look, it's nice to be higher up in the first round, but I low key think the team with the 7th pick has just as much a chance as the team with the first pick on hitting on that pick, because baseball is the one sport where the draft is not as much of a sure thing as it is in other sports. Like, people in the NBA know when they get Victor Wembanyama, they're going to be good. People in the NFL knew whenever the Bengals got Joe Burrow, they were good. Like, I don't know that whoever gets Dylan Cruz or Drew Cruz or whatever his name is for the number 1 overall pick, is that team going to be good whenever he comes to the major league? I don't know that.
And that's the thing. Major League Baseball, the first round picks, they're not starting opening day. They're not starting opening day. It's not like football and basketball.
4-6 years before you even see them. And that's the hardest part about the whole idea of draft and develop. When you tell your fans that we're going to build the majority of our team from drafting and developing, you really got to hit hard on the draft. And it's just such a crapshoot.
Danny New checks in and just talking about Jeter Downs, says that Downs was hitting under 200 at AAA. Seems like a Billy Hamilton without the speed. Well, wow. That's yeah.
It's like saying Lucky Charms without the marshmallows. Like, who's getting that cereal?
Right. Ronnie Snyder checks in about Joey Votto, Jeff, and says hopefully the Reds will keep Votto and he'll have a comeback player of the year award-winning season. I agree with this. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Never underestimate Joseph Daniel Votto. And for me, I'm in the camp of let's get him the comeback player of the year award. I hope that's how that plays out.
I think it's far more likely that he stays the entire year as a Red and wins the comeback player of the year award as opposed to being traded. Like, I will stand by this. Like, I like the thought exercise, and that's why I wanted to talk about the comment from Kenneth, but I also don't believe that there's a high chance of this. I think it's less than 10% of chance. It might be less than 5% of a chance that the Reds would actually trade.
I think that's a comment for you right there. Kenneth's checking us out right now, and you say his name correctly. Listen, folks, if you're counting on anybody on this show to say a name correctly, it's Jeffrey Carr. It is not me. I'm still trying to say Miley. I'm not even trying. Yeah. Miley, right?
You said Miley. You're saying the name right.
But see, I don't think it's right when I say it's wrong. That's why. Okay, listen, I might be saying it the way he says is right, but it's wrong because it's Hawaiian and it's Miley. So,
like my mom when she tried to say Pokemon,
cultural appropriation.
Like, Pokemon.
Oh my
what
God.
Was it?
Really? Jesus. Great. Jimmy McFarland wants to know about bringing Donovan Solano back. Dude can hit. Yes. He hits a little bit above league average. And if we were going to have to only pay him league average, I think that would probably be okay. But Solano is going to go get paid somewhere. And I think he deserves it, in a season that was terrible for a lot of what was going on around him. He performed well. And I just don't see the Reds bringing him back.
I think it's funny how the free agent market has moved this offseason as a whole, because the urgency that Steve Cohen has interjected into every other team has actually created a very interesting offseason. Usually, I mean, in years past, we're sitting here right now and maybe 2 of those guys that have already signed have signed. Like in years past, it was such a slow grind, a slow burn, and you got somebody this week, somebody next week, maybe 2 weeks from now, you'll have somebody. That didn't happen this year. And so I caught myself thinking this the other day. I'm like, man, can't believe Donovan Solano hasn't signed yet. And then I'm like, wait, it's not even Christmas. Like, there's a really good chance that he signs in the month of January. There's a lot of these guys, and like Corey Kluber and Johnny Cueto, and it's like, why are these guys still available? It's because there's still a lot of offseason left. So I definitely think Donovan Solano does get signed. He's probably a guy that signs like, late January, early February, as teams are still figuring out their roster. But I do believe that he goes to a contender still.
Before we move on, I just want to say that I'm shocked that none of you people watching have shouted out my fashion sense with the Bengals Aloha shirt. I'm actually a little bit ticked off about that. but that's a conversation for another day. This is a good question. What happens with Christian and Carson Strand and Spencer Steer if Joey Votto stays around? I don't think it impacts Spencer Steer at all. I think the Reds envision Spencer Steer having a lot of time at third base in 2023 and then super utility around the world when De La Cruz comes up, when, they're going to make the pieces fit. Steer is going to get full-time at bats, maybe not full-time at one position. CES, I don't think sees the major leagues next year anyway, and I don't think it matters.
See, that's interesting. I think he gets called up around mid.
Really?
I
Really?
I think we will.
Do you really
see
think
CES
he's going to be
season.
up?
Yeah, I do.
So where do you see him starting out of spring training?
I don't know about I don't know about spring training, but I think eventually he's going to be the third baseman. I think that
this year, 2023.
Yeah.
2020. So do you see him in Louisville?
Oh yeah, definitely to start the season. He was in Louisville last year.
Right. You see him. Was he?
Could be misremembered.
I thought he was in Chattanooga. Okay. Maybe I'm wrong about that. It's,
But yeah, I think that third base is going to be interesting because you've moved Noelvi Marte there in the Arizona Fall League. So I think that they are preparing for him to play third base. And just like Baseball America said, he'll play third base as well. And CES is the first baseman in waiting. But I think that does open up the opportunity to move Joey Votto to DH a little bit more. That's going to be the and I keep coming up with that's going to be the interesting thing. But when it comes to his future as a Cincinnati Red, A, how interested is he in staying for less money? But also B, I think that Nick Krall is going to have the conversation with him. Okay, if you come back, you're probably going to be DHing a lot more than playing first base because we got some guys that can cover that bag a little bit better than you can and probably better than you have in the last like 5 or 6 years. So I think that the Reds will be smart in that regard. I still think that Spencer Steer's best quality is going to be the Reds' Ben Zobrist. So I don't think that affects him at all. I agree with you there.
Okay. Well, let's see how this plays out. Willie Bob thinks that wants to know if the Reds go out and get a free agent, what's the number one position and who do they get?
Other than Cueto, I think a relief pitcher. Like I really want an outfielder, but I don't know that they're going to do that. I feel like
outfield's the biggest need.
It is. I think
if you're going to go sign a free agent, but you're probably right. Bullpen.
I think that the bullpen, it's almost like if you're a general manager in the sport of Major League Baseball, you wake up every day and you're just like, bullpen. I gotta get a bullpen guy. Well, no, first I need coffee. Then I need a bullpen guy. And that's just how they operate because that's what every team always needs, whether it's the trade deadline, the offseason, whenever. They always need more bullpen guys. And I think that the Reds will make a move to sign a bullpen guy because, the last couple of years, whether or not they worked out, that's what they gave major league contracts to Sean Doolittle and Hunter Strickland.
Oh, Sean Doolittle. Oh my God. Crazy Carl 30 checks in and says that Joey Votto sent out a video of his rehab and his swings look way better than what Crazy Carl thought they would look like at this point, and does some applause. Listen, I was excited to see that Joey's swinging the bat a little bit. And I agree with you. I think he's going to be ready for opening day. I really do. That was early on. That was in doubt, but I think he's going to be ready for opening day.
I think that there's going to be a 30 for 30 made about Joey Votto, and anytime he's injured, there's going to be a Rocky montage of him like rehabbing, like he's in a barn carrying trees or lifting a tractor or something. I don't know. Like he's literally doing everything he can possibly do, and it's like 110% more than I could ever do on like my best, most productive day ever. Like he's just that focused on getting back by opening day. I'm with you. I don't think he misses any time.
Wayne checks in with us today. Wayne, thanks for watching. He says he's excited about the young talent that the Reds have. He remembers back to 1986 when all of the young players came up for the Reds, and then they were a world champion in 1990. Maybe the Reds can catch lightning in a bottle again. Wayne, from your lips to God's ears, I am ready for another World Series.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I love Wayne's enthusiasm as well, because that's the hardest thing to sell right now, because Reds fans are watching other teams doing stuff. They even saw the Pirates sign a free agent, and they're just like, why aren't we doing that? But that's not what their mantra was going to be at this offseason at all. Like, I think that the Reds are going to approach free agency and trades as if, okay, we've made most of the cake here. We're just trying to put the toppings on. And that's what the free agents and the trade moves are going to be, is putting the toppings on a well-made cake that's ready for the World Series. I don't think that they're there at all yet. So we're probably looking at next year, some more moves, and definitely, the following years, they're going to be more active. It's just this season is about how can they have as many open spots as possible for the young guys who are ready to play.
Kenneth checks in again, and I put these up from time to time just because, but this is clearly about me. He says, of all the Locked On shows he takes in, including other sports, this is by far the best quality of information by a lot. Thank you, Kenneth. I appreciate that. I don't let Jeff drag me down. I do what I can do. No, seriously, Kenneth, thank you. And all you guys that message us all the time and shout out, how great you think the show is. We really appreciate you. We continue to do this for you. You are what keeps us motivated. I'm still jazzed from Reds Fest and all of the people that stopped us and came up and said hi and spent time talking baseball with us, Jeff. I can't get enough of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I always appreciate everybody shouting out. It's a lot of fun getting to do this each and every day, because we're curious Reds fans just like you, and we are always going to bring the pulse. We're going to try to bring the pulse of the fan base and what's going on with the team and what the most important questions are, and trying to give you our answers.
Listen, I know we're way over on time, Jeff, but I want to try and keep the comment section. You guys are great today. You guys are just going off. I love it. Let's just roll for a little bit more. Ronnie Snyder says doing away with the shift will allow Joey Votto to hit between 285 and 300 this year. Listen, that's a real possibility. I think that the elimination of the shift has the potential to see batting averages, including Joey Votto's, rise. The real wild card in this whole thing is how defenses actually play this thing, because if you read the letter of the rule, it just requires that when the pitcher starts to deliver his pitch, there has to be two infielders on either side of second base with their toes in the dirt. Once that delivery starts, the way that I read the rule is there's nothing to say that the second baseman can't sprint out into short right and everybody can pinwheel while the pitcher is delivering his pitch. So, guys will be a little bit more out of position than they are when they just set up in the shift. But I don't necessarily think that it means we go back to 1980s baseball. So it's going to be interesting to see just exactly how this whole thing is implemented.
The only thing I might push back a little bit on is you got to have a real darn athletic shortstop to make that work.
Mike Moustakas, baby.
Yeah, put him back at second base. No, you got to have a real quick dude. You're talking about as the pitch is delivered, he's got to start running to short right field or wherever they're going to, put him at, or maybe he runs over to the second base spot and the second baseman backs up a few steps. But then you're also talking about how quickly is that ball hit, what kind of pitch is it, all this different stuff. It will be interesting to see how teams deploy their outfield as well. I've heard talk of, bringing the right fielder in and moving the center fielder out, more shading to right center field, or even just in right field in general, and turning the outfield into a shifted thing. But overall, I do think that hitting will be better, but we will see some creative ways, especially from some managers that love the shift, of how they can still employ it.
All right, we're going to go try and get a little rapid here, Jeff. Michael Atwell also agrees with me that Jonathan India needs a healthy season. He thinks you're wrong, Jeff. I agree with Michael. Andrew checks in and says, if the Reds got Cueto and Kluber, and assuming that Lodolo and Green progress, you could actually have a fringe playoff team. I've been saying that all along, Jeff. I agree with Andrew. And he left out Graham Ashcraft as well in that equation. Could you imagine a rotation of Lodolo, Green, Ashcraft, Kluber, and Cueto?
That would be very nice.
That is a playoff team-ish rotation.
Then you really could employ a 6-man rotation, in that you could have the rookies, Williamson and Stout, starting every 10 to 15 days. And then you could give your other guys a little bit of extra rest. That would be intriguing to see. I don't necessarily know if the Reds will do that, but that would make them. I would say I would definitely take the over on wins, whatever the over under total is. But I think that they would be closer to an 81 win team.
Willie Bob wants to know about signing Andrew McCutchen, which you and I were kind of on board with getting him. Was it 2 seasons ago that when we talked about that in the offseason? I like Andrew McCutchen in a platoon with one of the left-handers in the outfield.
Whatever I said about Adam Duvall, insert that for Andrew McCutchen. And actually, McCutchen is probably a little bit better defensively than Duvall is. So, yeah, give him he'd be the right-handed platoon to all the lefties in the outfield.
The idea of a dual MVP bobblehead for Votto and McCutchen has to be enough for ownership to sign him. Andrew, this was a timely comment for you. Yeah.
You could do it, but then you'd have to put him in a Pirates uniform because he didn't win the MVP as a Red.
Oh, well, we could pretend, couldn't we? We could. All right, Jeff, tell us a story for just a second. Let me scroll these comments and find us like 2 more.
Oh man, I really think looking forward to this season. Like I mentioned, I think CES comes up. I think probably September we'll see Noelvi Marte. Like I get this feeling, and I've seen an article in the Inquirer from Bobby Nightingale talking about how Derek Johnson, running the pitching, being the pitching coordinator for the franchise last year, really has instilled this idea of if a dude is ready to get promoted, promote him. Let's not mess around. Let's not ask any more questions. Like when we think he's ready, we're bringing him up. So I think that we will see a decent number more debuts this season just from guys who have the talent and look like they're ready to go. I mean, I still think they're considering Jose Barrero's situation a little bit of promoting the guy too quickly, but I also know that there was plenty of underlying things in Barrero's minor league profile that was kind of hinting at the fact that he didn't have any plate discipline. I think the guys that we're looking at now, Marte's got plate discipline. CES, he's got plate discipline. And they've all got the talent to play at this level.
Let's do a couple more, Jeff. Ronnie Snyder says he truly believes last year was a one-off. Never in his lifetime has there been so many injuries to so many players, star players at that. This is going to be a turnaround of epic proportions. I'm all in, Ronnie. I think 2023, they could be sneaky into the conversation for that last wild card spot. And I really do think 2024, I mean, I'm not just saying it because I'm trying to be optimistic or rah-rah. I think in 2024, they could have one of the better records in baseball with one of the lowest payrolls. I think I agree. There's a turnaround coming.
Those injuries were so key. I mean, how many? What was it? At one point, we said there were 18 guys on the injured list. Like, come on. Even though the Reds weren't supposed to be that good last year, it doesn't matter how good a team. If the Dodgers had 18 guys on the injured list, they would have been flirting with not winning the division. So I totally agree with Ryan. He's got a good point.
All right. I got to find it again. There's a question about the bullpen, and that's where we're going to wrap up. I lost it. Someone asked, how deep do we think the bullpen is heading into 2023? I think the bullpen's a big problem just because there's so many unanswered questions about health. We don't know what Lucas Sims is going to look like. We don't know when TJ Antone's going to get to pitch. We don't know if Gutierrez is going to contribute to the bullpen. We don't know if Tony Santillan is going to be good Tony Santillan or bad Tony Santillan. There's a lot of I don't know with this bullpen.
Yeah, because the injuries that some of these guys are coming off of are not your run-of-the-mill stuff. Like, obviously, TJ Antone with a second Tommy John. You have Lucas Sims and Tony Santillan with back issues. Like, they're not the cut and dry, okay, he strained something, that thing is better now, he's ready to pitch. Like, the back stuff really concerns me with Lucas Sims and with Tony Santillan. Like, how are they going to recover from what it is that they went through, especially Santillan, because Santillan was a dude that whenever he first hit the IL, they're like, yeah, this is precautionary. We'll probably see him back in a couple of weeks. And then we just never saw him again. Like he was on the injury list for the rest of the season. So the way that these guys can come back, it's going to be a huge question mark throughout spring training is if they can stay healthy as they work themselves up ready for the season. But also the fact that the bullpen was slightly a bit better last year, if you look at it, the way that they were better is that they were just replacement level. So, and for the last couple of years, they've been way below replacement level. So where is the baseline for this bullpen? Because I don't think the floor is super high. I think there's quite a range of outcomes with this bullpen, and that gives me some pause.
I think the thing that I'm frustrated most about by this bullpen is that for the third year now, it's the weakest link.
Yeah.
They haven't addressed this in multiple years, and it really bothers me. And I hope that a lot of these guys come back healthy and perform. But we, poor Chad, he says hope is not a strategy one time, and we beat it to death, right? Shout out to our buddy Chad Dotson for me stealing his lines. But here's where we're going to wrap it up for today, Jeffrey. If my thing will quit scrolling, here we go. Colton lets us know that the Reds will win 30 more games just because Hunter Strickland is not the closer. And I think that is the optimistic point to end the show on today. Wrap us up, Jeff.
I like that, Carlton. That's pretty good. Thanks, everybody, for joining us here on this Aloha Live edition of the Locked On Reds podcast. Your questions, your comments, and everything that you've got for us is always greatly appreciated. If this is your first time, make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast. Make sure you click that bell to get notified whenever we go live on Fridays. We're going to try to do this with more regularity. I know it's been now 2 weeks in a row that we've had this, but we're going to try to continue the consistency here. And also, we've got plenty of content coming for you in the offseason. As the Reds make moves, as the Reds do things to improve on this season, we're going to be right here with you because we are what, Steve?
We are Locked On Reds every single day. We'll see you next time.